Hey everyone, the topic of this video is nested and complex logic. More specifically, we'll go over nested loops, nested lists, and list methods. So our first example says to write a program which prints out 3 verses of the classic Batman theme song using nested loops. So we'll print out 3 of these 13 NAs, na na na, and then 1 Batman at the end. So of course we could just literally print this out and that would be totally fine. However, this is a good application of nested loops because we need to do a lot of repeated tasks for each one repeated task. And that one bigger repeated task is printing out that one line of NAS, and then we have an interior task of printing out 13 NAS in a row. So first, let's make that outer loop for I in range 0 to 3. That will make us 3 lines of NAS. And then we need to somehow make a line of 13 NAS in a row. So this is, again, why I'm using this example is because it's a good candidate for nested loops. So we can say for j in range 0 to 13. And we'll print out NA with a space as well. And then after, we will print Batman. All right, so this works because for each iteration of the outer loop, the inner loop runs fully, which is the key to nested loops. So we want to have 13 NAS on one line before we end that line. And this brings up a good point. We need to end the line as well. So we'll say print there, and then let's see what happens when we print this out. So we get all these NAS, but it looks like they're on separate lines. So we could make an output string and concatenate each of the 13 NAS to it, but there's a special argument that we can pass into print, which is end equals an empty string. And that removes the new line, and then we have a new line after that loop. So for index I equals 0, we go through 13 NAS, print them all out, and then print a new line. And that's it for example 1. All right, next we're given a list of a lot of different data types, including some lists in it, and we want to do all of these tasks. So first, we'll open up the Python docs because this is definitely going to help us later. And I want to point out a few functions that we may use today. So insert is a good one. Remove is also good. Clear, count, and sort. These are all functions you may find yourself using with lists. Also, of course, append. So our first task is to print how many times A appears in the list. Well, we just saw that there's a count function. So let's see what that does. It returns the number of times X appears in the list. So that's exactly what we need. So let's just print data.count A. And that gives us 2. Now, note an interesting thing happening here. You may notice 3 A's in this list, but the count function doesn't go into nested lists inside of one list. So we only got the A's at the top level. Next, we want to print out B using list access notation. So this is a little tedious, but a good way to do this is, again, just to write it out. So I'll write out the indices. A is at 0 in our list. True is at 1. The list with hello in it is at 2, 958 is at 3, and then finally our nested list is at 4. So to start this off, we can say print data at 4. That gives us this list. And then if we want to look inside of it, A is at 0, and the list with B inside of it is at 1. So we can print data at 4 at 1. We can chain these together. And then we still have a list, so we need to get the element out of it, which is at 0. And that finally gets us to B using list access notation. Next, we want to remove any instances of true in the list and print the list. If we want to look back at the documentation, there is a remove function provided for us in lists. And it removes the first item from the list whose value is equal to X. It raises a value error if there is no such item. We don't need to worry about that error today for this example. So we'll say data.remove true, and we'll print data. And that removed the true at index 1, However, in line with what we read in the documentation, the last true was not removed. So if we want to remove all of them, we can data.remove true again and print that out, and that works. Next, we're doing a basic adding to the list, which you should know how to do already. Data.append hello world, and we'll print that list. So that worked. And now we want to add the string testing to the middle of the list, and we want to print the list. Looking back at our documentation, I think insert may come in handy here. It says it inserts an item at a given position, and note that the order of the parameters is the index comes first, the element to insert comes after. So we can say data.insert. I'll put in our second argument first, which is testing. And now we need to find the index, which is the middle of the list. Now we can't insert at a decimal value. And this is important because what if our list has an odd number of elements? This is where integer division or typecasting to an int may come in handy. In my case, I'll just typecast to an int. So we want to type convert int, and then we'll put the length of the data list divided by 2 in there. So that will truncate the decimal, because if our list has 9 elements, divided by 2, that's 4.5. Converted to an integer is 4. If we print out data, you can check that this is in the middle at index 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, finally, we want to remove all items in the list, so we'll say data.clear, and we can print, and there will be nothing in it. All right, so example 3, we're doing a little more with nested lists. We're storing songs, which has attributes name, artist, album, and is explicit. Now we want to print the songs in alphabetical order and print them nicely. So first, we may want to sort them. And in our list documentation, there's a sort function as well provided, and by default, it will sort alphabetically. So we can simply say songs.sort, and that part is done. Now we need to actually get everything out of the nested list, and also note that this nested list is a nested list, even though it may not look like it. It's just broken up over multiple lines, which you can do. So we'll say for song and songs, because we don't care about the index, so we'll just use that for in loop, and we'll get each list out. So keep in mind, each song is still a list. And so we'll need to use some list access here. Maybe title is song at 0, artist is song at 1, album is song at 2, and is explicit is song at 3. Finally, we just need to print these nicely, so we'll say print title. If is explicit, we will print an E in front of this, and then the artist name. Otherwise, we'll just print the artist name. And then we need the album name as well. And then finally, we'll add a new line to make it nice. And that printed out everything in alphabetical order by song name. And we got each bit of data out of the nested list, which also is good. Now, just a side note, we'll learn classes and objects later in the class, which would probably be a better application of storing this type of data, but nested lists is a good way to show you how to store a lot of related data. All right, that's it for nested and complex logic. As usual, let us know if you need any help, and stop into office hours if you need.